My family abandoned me on my 18th birthday. But when my grandfather found out the truth, he changed his will and took everything from them. Now, my mother begs while I inherit millions and she got nothing. I'm 18 years old. I just started college. And honestly, I'm still processing everything that happened a few months ago with my family. The thing is, I always knew my parents preferred my sister Nicole. I always knew it. But I never thought they'd go as far as they did. I guess I should start from the beginning so you can understand everything properly. I grew up in a house where I was basically invisible. My sister Nicole is 21 years old. So, she's 3 years older than me. And for as long as I can remember, she's been the golden child of the family. Everything she did was perfect. You know? She'd get good grades and my parents would celebrate her like she'd won the Nobel Prize. I'd get the same grades and they'd barely tell me good job. She participated in debate club and my parents went to all her events with signs and cameras. I was on the swim team and my parents literally never came to see me compete. Not once in 4 years. Not once. And when I'd ask them why they hadn't, they always had some excuse. That they were tired, that they had work, that Nicole needed help with something. Always Nicole. My mom, Elizabeth, is 48 years old and my dad, Joseph, is 51, and they've basically spent my whole life making me feel like I'm a burden to them. It's not like they were abusive in the traditional sense, like they didn't hit me or anything like that, but the emotional neglect was constant. Little things that accumulate over the years, you know what I mean? Like when it was my birthday and they'd buy me something from the supermarket at the last minute, but for Nicole, they'd plan parties months in advance. Or when Nicole wanted something expensive, like a new iPhone or designer clothes, and they'd buy it for her without thinking twice. But when I'd ask for something necessary for school, they'd tell me it was too expensive or that it wasn't important. Literally, once I needed a scientific calculator for math and my mom told me to use the one on my phone, but 2 weeks later, they bought Nicole an iPad Pro because she needed it for her graphic design classes. The person who always supported me was my grandfather, my mom's dad. He was always different with me. He treated me like I actually mattered, like he actually saw me. He'd come visit us often and always ask me how I was, how school was going, what I was doing. Sometimes he'd take me out for ice cream or to the movies, just the two of us, and those were the only moments where I felt like someone in my family actually cared about me. I guess he saw what was happening but never said anything directly, at least not until what happened on my 18th birthday. So, fast forward to a few months ago. I was about to turn 18 inches April, and honestly, I wasn't expecting much because I already knew how things were in my house. But I thought, well, it's my 18th birthday, it's important. Maybe this time will be different. How naive I was. Seriously. I told my mom a month before that. I'd like to have a small dinner at a restaurant, nothing fancy, just a normal place that serves pasta and pizzas. You know, something casual. I'd invite my family and a couple of close friends, 6 or 7 people total. My mom said yes, that it seemed fine, and I thought, great. Finally, we're going to do something for my birthday. Weeks went by and I was excited, organizing everything. I reserved a table at the restaurant for 7 p.m. I confirmed with my 2 best friends that they'd come. I reminded my parents and Nicole several times about the date and time. Everything seemed to be in order. The day arrived. I put on a nice dress that I'd bought with my own money from the part-time job I had at a coffee shop. I did my hair, put on a little makeup. I felt good, optimistic even. I arrived at the restaurant at 7 o'clock, sharp like we'd agreed. And there I stayed, waiting. 7, 0, 5, 7, 10, 7, 15. Nobody was coming. I texted my friends and they replied that my parents had written to them saying the dinner was canceled. I didn't know anything about that. Nobody had told me anything. 7:20, 7:25. The waitress kept passing by and asking if I was ready to order, and I'd tell her I was waiting for my family, with a fake smile on my face, while inside I was dying of embarrassment. People at other tables were looking at me with pity. The girl alone on her birthday waiting for people who clearly weren't going to show up. At 7:30, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Nicole because my parents weren't answering their phones. She answered super casually, like nothing was wrong, and she tells me, oh yeah, tonight got canceled. Mom wasn't feeling well, so we decided to stay home. Didn't we tell you? And I'm like, no, Nicole. Nobody told me anything. I'm here alone at the restaurant waiting for half an hour, and she just says, "Oh well, sorry, we forgot to tell you," and hangs up. They forgot to tell me, on my birthday, that they canceled my birthday dinner and forgot to let me know. I sat there literally unable to move. I felt like someone had thrown a bucket of cold water on me, like someone had kicked me in the stomach. I couldn't cry because I was in public and didn't want to make a scene, but the tears were coming out on their own and I couldn't control them. The waitress came over and asked if I was okay, and I just shook my head. I was going to leave, to run out of there, when suddenly, I see my grandfather walking into the restaurant. I wasn't expecting him. He wasn't officially invited because I thought it was going to be something small. But there he was. He came up to my table with a huge smile and a wrapped present in his hands. He told me, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was horrible." And there I was, completely broken, trying not to cry more, and he immediately realized something was wrong. He sat down and asked me what happened. Where was everyone? I told him everything. That nobody had come, that they canceled without telling me everything. I saw how his face changed as I told him, how it got more and more serious and angry. My grandfather ordered food for both of us, the best food on the menu, and we spent like 2 hours there talking and trying to make me feel better. He gave me his present, which was a beautiful silver bracelet with my initial, and he told me to never forget that I was worth a lot, that I was special, that I shouldn't let anyone make me feel less. I cried more, but this time out of gratitude. He paid the bill, which wasn't cheap because he'd ordered several dishes and dessert, and he took me home around 10 p.m. When we got to the house, my parents and Nicole were in the living room watching a movie, all comfortable and relaxed. My mom was perfectly fine. Nothing about being sick. They didn't even look at me when I walked in. My grandfather lost it right there. He started yelling at them, asking how they could do that to their own daughter, how they could forget, to tell her they were canceling her birthday dinner, how they could be so cruel. My mom started defending herself, saying she'd had a headache and that they assumed I would understand. And my grandfather told her she was clearly fine now watching TV, that it was a lie, that what they'd done was unforgivable. The argument escalated badly. My dad got involved, saying that my grandfather had no right to come to his house and yell at them. And my grandfather responded with something I'll never forget. He said, "You're lucky that today I only came to talk, but let me tell you something. I'm changing my will first thing tomorrow. Not a cent is going to Elizabeth. After how she's treated Madison all these years, everything is going to Madison, and her brother, my uncle." My mom went pale, literally, like she'd seen a ghost. She started saying he was overreacting, that it was just a misunderstanding. But my grandfather was already leaving. He gave me a hug, told me to call him if I needed anything, and left, leaving my parents in shock. That night, I cried myself to sleep. The next day, I thought maybe they'd talk to me, maybe they'd apologize. But no. They treated me like I'd done something wrong, like I was the one to blame for my grandfather getting angry at them. The silence in the house was horrible. Nobody spoke, but I could feel their resentment toward me. But wait, because it gets worse. Turns out 2 days later, it was Nicole's birthday. 2 days later. And guess what? They threw a huge party at the house. They invited like 20 people, bought decorations, made fancy food, bought her expensive presents. Everything. I was there watching them do all this for her when they hadn't even said happy birthday to me 2 days earlier. My mom was perfectly fine, running around organizing things, laughing and taking pictures. The hypocrisy was disgusting. During the party, I stayed in my room most of the time. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to pretend I was happy for Nicole, when inside I was destroyed. At one point, my mom came upstairs and told me to come down. That I was acting like a spoiled brat. That it was my sister's birthday, and I should be there supporting her. I told her I didn't want to go down, and she told me I was selfish, that I was always causing problems, that Nicole would never do something like this. I closed the door in her face and put on headphones so I wouldn't hear the party. The next day, I talked to my best friend, and I told her everything that had happened. She and her family had always been super good to me. Her mom treated me better than my own mother, honestly. She offered for me to stay at her house for a few days to take some distance from my family, and I accepted. I packed some things and left. My parents didn't even ask where I was going or when I'd be back. Nicole was in her room and didn't come out to say goodbye either. I left, and nobody said goodbye. Nobody called me that night to see if I was okay. Nothing. I was at my friend's house for like a week. It was the most peaceful week I'd had in years, without the constant tension, without feeling invisible in my own house. But I knew I had to go back eventually. I had things I needed for college that I was starting in a few months. I went back on a Saturday afternoon. The house was weird when I arrived. There was a tense atmosphere. My mom was in the kitchen and didn't even greet me when I walked in. I went up to my room and realized they'd been in there. They'd moved my things. I didn't say anything. I just wanted to avoid conflicts. I went downstairs later because I was hungry, and in the sink there was a pile of dirty dishes. My mom saw me and told me to wash them. I told her they weren't mine, that I'd just arrived and hadn't eaten there in a week. She told me she didn't care. That while I lived in her house, I was going to help with chores. That I'd been lazy at my friend's house while they worked. Something in me broke in that moment. I told her I was fed up, that they'd never treated me like part of the family, that it had always been just Nicole, Nicole, Nicole. My mom yelled at me not to talk to her like that. I yelled back that it was the truth. My dad came because of the noise, and instead of trying to calm things down, he started yelling at me too. They told me that if I wasn't happy with how things were, I should leave, that nobody was forcing me to stay. I told them perfect. I was leaving. And my dad said, fine. You have 1 hour to get your stuff out of this house. 1 hour. They gave me 1 hour to pack up my whole life. I went up to my room shaking with rage and sadness. I called my friend crying, telling her what was happening, and she told me to come to her house, not to worry. I started packing what I could, but 1 hour isn't enough for 18 years of life. My mom came up at 45 minutes and told me my time was running out. I managed to fill 2 large suitcases and a backpack, but I had to leave so many things: photos, books, clothes, childhood memories, everything. I called my grandfather before I left and told him what was happening. He got furious, said he was coming over immediately, but I told him no, that I just wanted to leave already, that I couldn't be there 1 more minute. He promised we'd go get the rest of my things another day, when things calmed down. I left that house without looking back, with my suitcases and my broken heart. 2 weeks went by. 2 weeks where my parents didn't call me once, didn't ask if I was okay, where I was, nothing. Nicole wrote to me once saying I was overreacting and that I should apologize, but I didn't respond. Apologize for what? For finally standing up for myself? No, thanks. My grandfather called my mom to coordinate a day where I could go get the rest of my things. She agreed. We settled on a Tuesday afternoon when everyone would supposedly be at work. My grandfather came with me because I didn't want to go alone, and also because I needed help carrying boxes. We got to the house and something was wrong. I knew it as soon as we walked in. We went up to my room and I almost fainted when I opened the door. It was empty. Well, not completely empty. My bed and desk were still there, but everything else had disappeared. My clothes, my books, my posters, my swim trophies, my framed photos, my stuffed animals, everything. The walls were bare, the closet was empty, the drawers were empty. It was like I'd never lived there. I ran downstairs looking for my mom, and there she was, sitting in the living room with Nicole, drinking coffee like nothing was wrong. I asked them where my things were, and my mom said very calmly that she'd donated and thrown them away, that if I hadn't taken them, it was because I didn't want them. Donated, thrown away. 18 years of memories, gifts, things that can't be replaced, and she'd thrown them away like trash. I yelled at her, how could she do that? That those things were mine. That she had no right. She laughed. She laughed in my face, and said that everything in that house was theirs, that they'd paid for it, that I had no right to anything. Nicole was laughing too, saying that it was all just clutter anyway, and they were doing me a favor. My grandfather tried to talk to my mom, ask her how she could be so cruel, but she simply said to get out of her house or she'd call the police. We left. There was nothing else to do. In the car, I completely broke down. I cried like never before in my life. My grandfather hugged me and let me cry on his shoulder, saying I'm sorry over and over. It wasn't his fault. He didn't have to apologize. But he did anyway because he did love me. He did see me as someone who was worth something. The following days were horrible. I was still at my friend's house and her family treated me incredibly, but I felt lost. All my childhood things had disappeared. Photos I could never recover. Gifts from people who weren't in my life anymore. Memories that only existed in those objects. My mom had destroyed them just out of meanness, just to hurt me, and she'd succeeded. My grandfather called me a few days later and told me we should go shopping. I needed things for college that was starting in a month. New clothes, supplies, all the basics. We went and he insisted on buying me everything. He wouldn't let me pay for anything. He bought me clothes, shoes, a new laptop, school supplies, hygiene products, everything I needed and more. He spent like $2,000 easily, maybe more. I kept telling him it was too much, that he didn't have to do that. But he insisted, saying he wanted to do it, that I deserved it. My best friend was also incredible. She told me we could share things, that what was hers was mine, not to worry. She lent me books, clothes, makeup, everything. Her mom told me I could stay with them until I started college, that I didn't have to go back to my parents ever if I didn't want to. I cried out of gratitude, because these people who didn't share my blood were treating me like family, better than my real family had ever done. It's been a few months since all that. I started college recently. I'm studying business administration, sharing a dorm with my best friend. My parents haven't contacted me once. Not on my first day of classes, not on my birthday, which was a few weeks ago. Nothing. Nicole has me blocked on all social media. It's like I stopped existing for them. And honestly, they stopped existing for me too. My grandfather kept his promise and changed his will. He told me recently that all his money and properties are going to be divided between my uncle and me. My mom gets nothing. I know she's still furious about it. My uncle told me she calls him often trying to convince him to change his mind, but he doesn't give in. He says his decision is final, that she had years to change and never did. Sometimes I feel guilty, like I'm to blame for my family falling apart. I wonder if I should have kept quiet, if I should have endured a little longer. But then I remember how they treated me, how they made me feel for years, and I know I did the right thing by leaving. I didn't deserve that treatment. Nobody deserves it. Last week I saw my mom at the supermarket by chance. She was alone, pushing a cart, and when she saw me, she froze. We looked at each other for a second, and I waited for her to say something. Anything. At least a hello. But she just looked away and kept walking like I was a stranger. And I guess that's what I am to her now. A stranger. It hurt to see her like that. I'm not going to lie. But it was also liberating in a way. I don't have to try to earn her love or approval anymore. I don't have to compete with Nicole for crumbs of attention. I'm free to live my life. To surround myself with people who really love me and value me. My grandfather is still my biggest support. We talk on the phone like 3 times a week, and he comes to visit me on campus every 2 weeks, always bringing me something: food, emergency money, or just his company. He tells me he's proud of me, that I'm strong, that I'm going to be okay. And I think he's right. I'm going to be okay, eventually.